Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Patrick Tucker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Patrick Tucker, the Science and Technology Editor at Defense One, and this is our panel, Military Mobility, NATO's Road to Readiness on the Eastern Flank. And not a lot of people understand sometimes the importance of military mobility. It sounds like something that is hard to grasp as opposed to shooting or bombing. But if you look at the opening days of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, and you see that line of Russian military equipment stuck, and you see the rapidness of Ukrainian forces moving to different spots, quickly maneuvering in order to target the incoming Russians, that fastness of maneuverability is built on mobility, having the right equipment in the right place at the right time. It doesn't just happen by accident. It's actually incredibly difficult. It's all accelerating in part because of new threats, drones, etc., that can target aspects of mobility, and because of new technologies like artificial intelligence that allow you to potentially place things more quickly, more seamlessly where they need to be. It's a rapid cycle that is accelerating. So, with that, please join me in welcoming to the stage my panel. We have Marc-Aurel Bischoff, Piotr Błazeusz, General Piotr Błazeusz, Simona Cojocaru, Ben Hodges, okay, wait 1 second, sorry. There is a report first. First there's a report. Looking at this, yes. All right. So when they come on stage, please respond as though you are surprised and have never heard their names before and you're excited to see them. But first, let's have a report from GLOBSEC. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our deterrence and defense depends on our ability to dispatch and quickly deploy hundreds of thousands of NATO troops to the area. Successful deployment is a strategic maneuver by its nature, and it is sending clear message to our enemies, and it can predefine outcome of our operations. To successfully move, receive, integrate, stage, and provide onward movement of our troops, we need robust infrastructure, seamless procedures, strong support, information support, and protection of critical logistic sites. And this is what our report is all about. I will hand over to Marcin Zaborowski, who has collected all necessary information for this report, and he will give you also some recommendations.
Thank you very much, General, and thank you all for turning up and looking so surprised that it's us on the stage. Just very briefly, this report, which is called Road to Readiness, was compiled by General Pavel Macko, myself, and Karin Lukaszowa is here with us, hiding somewhere there. We basically, the basis of this report is to look into whether NATO Eastern flank nations have the ability to enable military mobility as it is being envisaged in NATO new force model. NATO new force model envisages that at the time of crisis in the Baltic states, for example, NATO should have an ability to deploy 100,000 troops within 10 days, up to 300,000 troops within a month. When we look into the state of the infrastructure, ports, roads, railroads, the airports, at the moment the set assessment is that visibility is not quite there. And we sort of compiled the data to prove that. When it comes to, for example, the road infrastructure, there has been a lot of the advancements there, of course. But still, for example, secondary roads in eastern Poland, eastern Slovakia, the Baltic states are substandards, and only about 42% of them are capable of carrying military loads. About 160 bridges need to be adjusted for the purposes of military transportation. We are doing better with airfields. About 62% of airfields are capable of servicing military needs in a time of crisis, but still, almost 40% are not. So this is really the basis of this report. We kind of go through all these areas, and then we also offer some prescriptions, which are short-term, middle-term, and long-term. When it comes to the short-term, certain things are pretty obvious. For example, at the border between Poland and Lithuania, you lose 24 hours to adjust the transport from the European gauge to the post-Soviet gauge. That can be shortened by certain infrastructure being implemented in the place. Middle term, we should already have Rail Baltica there. With Rail Baltica, actually, the rail will be the same gauge everywhere in this vulnerable area. And then our long-term recommendation there is that we are really aiming to have an ecosystem in the area whereby the entire eastern flank would be smooth and capable of providing military transportation in all of the domains. And with that, I think that we are coming to the end of what we were being alluded here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, General. Thank you, Karin, for your work. And we're up for another surprise with our panel. Thank you.
So if you are interested in the report, you can find it also online. Just use the QR code, or there are still printouts out there. So enjoy the report and enjoy the panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, General Macko and Marcin Zaborowski for that. And apologies for getting you momentarily. Won't happen again. And now, big surprise, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Marc-Aurel Bischoff, General Piotr Błazeusz, Ben Hodges, and Glen Howard to the stage. Have a seat, guys.
Ladies first.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I'm allowed to call him General Zeus. Zeus was his call sign. So, and I think that's a fantastic name for an Air Force and then Army commanding officer. Let's start off a little bit talking about multinational rapid response corps. How confident are you that NATO can move brigade-level formations eastward fast enough to deter an oncoming attack?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for being here. First of all, a little product location. Eurocorps is a unique headquarters because it's designed, because of its duality, to serve both the NATO and the EU. So this is a perfect test lab. This is a connecting tissue. This is the place where you can test those procedures at the tactical, operational level, both from NATO and the EU side, and I do it on a daily business. So from the open sources, you probably heard that Deutsche Bahn has enough flatbeds to move probably 1.5 brigade, right? So there are a lot of challenges. So I did experience. I was continuing what General Hodges was doing here when he was both LANDCOM and then U.S. Army Europe Commander. I'm testing and stressing the logistics as well. I deployed recently to Hungary from Strasbourg. You would think this is easy. We're in Europe, crossing 4 countries, including one non-NATO country, Austria. Not that many, but only about over 300 vehicles, 800 packs, 6 flights, 6 train echelons. Let me tell you, it was still not easy. I remember what General Hodges was telling when he was stress testing the system. We are better. There is no doubt about it. And there are a lot of that's being planned to improve. But for example, the Austria is, because it's a non-NATO member, it's a black hole. There are not that many information that we use and have in this NATO logistics functional areas services. system that we use. I was lucky because in my EUBG, I have Austria is responsible for logistics, and I have Austrian, the deputy commander. So that helped me with the Austria. But the LOCFAS challenge, for example, this is a NATO product. To put the so-called detailed deployment plans into the LOCFAS for Austrians and Irish, because I also have Irish who are part of the EUBG, it was impossible. But we found a way around. They were submitting it in paper, and NATO members of my EUBG were submitting into the LOCFAS. So those are little things that, very tactical problems. Then the whole issue of getting all the permits, the diplomatic clearances, still very bureaucratic process, still taking a lot of time. There are plans to digitize it even more and simplify it. So one of my train echelons was packed, ready to go, and I was still waiting for one diplomatic clearance. And then on the top of it, the real life issue, we had a foot and mouth disease in Hungary, so we had to decontaminate, plan quickly and decontaminate all the equipment and the people. But to sum up, another challenge that we discovered, if it's an EU exercise, there is no EU host nation support. Okay? Nations treat us differently than if it was a NATO exercise. So that's a bit challenging. And the other point is that the host nation support, system that we have for the moment is being adjusted, is being worked hard on, but it's not fit for purpose, okay? We need more probably collective logistics because countries just cannot absorb and support fully the amount of troops with the equipment that we plan to deploy. And last point, the multinational issue, the GSEC, everybody knows it was created. It's getting better and better as we speak. And right now, General Kai Schneider is also working the EU angle because he also understands that a lot can be done on the EU side. However, remember, whenever we talk about creating any structures, whether we need separate ones or these supranational ones, whatever, the issue is that it's always up to the nations to share the information and data. Okay, GSEC could be the best, but they depend on the data and the willingness of the nations to share certain details, sometimes showing certain weaknesses in our countries. I will stop there.
Yeah, no, thank you. But I was then briefly return. Based on that Byzantine structure of bureaucratic obstacles that exist within NATO and within each country, how confident are you that you can, despite all of these things, mobilize to meet the pace of an army where Vladimir Putin is able to train things into Belarus relatively quickly? He's designed to do that, and then perhaps wherever he wishes.
So what I say may be a little bit controversial.
Yes.
I've been always trained that this is your task, your mission, you have to perform. So if there is a threat, a real threat, meaning that we're on the brink of war, I will not care that much for any bureaucracy, okay? I will move my troops and, okay, try to stop me. Yeah. But that's not the solution. We need to continue improving, and there is a lot of good things happening. For example, the European Union Military Mobility Action Plan, right? We have those corridors that we have created between the countries to simplify the procedures, to identify the critical infrastructure and those critical logistics nodes that we have. So we are improving. I mean, really, there is a lot of improvement, but still, we are not quite there yet.
Yeah. So you're confident that you can kick some butt, but you're not confident that everybody else is going to make it easy for you.
Well, I may upset somebody in one of the capitals, but if they tell me you need to be there, I'll be there.
I like it. I like it. So, Glen Howard, president of the Saratoga Foundation, you have a report out very recently on some of these issues. How big is this problem in terms of just simple bureaucratic obstacles and also physical obstacles?
Well, first of all, I just wrote a report and a new study for Joint Air Power Competence Center, and it's found on the Saratoga Foundation website, and you can go there and download and look at the report. But the idea was born out of the fact that between all the way from Ramstein all the way to the Black Sea, there's a vast distance of 2,300 kilometers, and that most of NATO's thinking has been and rooted in Western Europe, and they have not moved deeper into Eastern Europe, and the idea was born when you're looking at alternative air bases and development of air bases in reaction to the Ukraine war and now entering its fourth year, the idea was that there were other airports and facilities that could serve for NATO as alternative air bases to examine and explore, and that was Ostrava here in the Czech Republic, and that was really critical because it can, the Czechs have invested a lot. They've bought $7.5 billion in F-35 fighters. They've made an investment in NATO with that, and they're now at 2%. But the Ostrava airfield could accommodate B-52 bombers. They've now developed what they call the Farm Borough of Eastern Europe, which the Ostrava Air Show draws about 200,000 people a year. It's one of the biggest air shows. So the whole point is that Ostrava could serve as a window on the Carpathians. And when you look at maps, and Americans are really bad at geography, but when you look at maps and you think about the Carpathians, you also look and see Western Ukraine. And the point is that Ramstein as an air base is irreplaceable, but you do need other air bases in between. And so when you look at the map, you go all the way to MK Air Base in Romania. It's a vast distance, but you need other aerial modes of transportation. So that's where the idea was born out. Ostrava was very perfectly situated. Air mobility is very critical. But NATO hadn't really thought, and the United States hadn't really thought more other than investing in infrastructure, but thinking about more about these types of structures. And the reason Ostrava was really important was because right now, as a supply node, through Rzeszów, 95% through Poland of the U.S. and NATO supplies to Ukraine go through one railroad and air node, and that's through Rzeszów in Poland that goes to Ukraine. The point is that there's a Patriot battery there, and if one ballistic missile strike hit that place, it could take out a lot of the supply and servicing capability in the event of a conflict. And so you got to think about other alternative supply nodes. And so because of the great logistics and transportation capabilities through railroad inside of the Czech Republic, it's a really good idea to develop these other alternative nodes and also reward Czechia for its investment and trying to upgrade and develop 2%, but also buying F-35 fighters from the United States perspective, and even from a Trump administration perspective, they made this investment, and so buying American is really important. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good. I've been to that air base where the Patriot battery is on the border of Poland, and with a very senior U.S. commander who was very adamant on retrenching and making sure that the reinforcements were sufficient to protect the U.S. Service folks that were there. And his argument was that if something should happen to them, if there's an errant drone or something, and you have a casualty, then that escalates this entire conflict in a way that no one is yet prepared for. So with that, let me turn to you, former commanding general for U.S. Army Europe, retired General Ben Hodges. If you don't follow Ben on Twitter, you absolutely must. He is a brilliant and outspoken voice for what must be done. He's a little bit modest, but not like too modest. But he really must follow his thinking on this. He's incredibly generous and precise with his comments. And one of the first things that I first talked to you about, General, was the Suwałki Gap, or as it's sometimes called, the Suwałki Corridor, as a primary weakness point, potentially vulnerable. And there's been a lot of work within NATO to seal this gap. This is a small, about 70-kilometer or so, I'm thinking right, area between Belarus and the Russian Oblast of Kaliningrad, and it sits right on the Polish-Lithuanian border. And if you seal that off, then theoretically you prevent reinforcements from going north to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And it's a tremendous area where there's been a lot of work, a lot of exercises, but also there's a lot of concern. So let me ask you, you've warned about NATO mobility gaps for years. What are the most critical challenges that NATO is facing right now in terms of these mobility gaps? And how do you assess the vulnerability of the Suwałki today?
So it's very important that we get the terminology correct. Of course, what my friend Glen meant to say is this is the 11th year of Russia's war against Ukraine, not the 4th year. It's important to keep that in mind. Secondly, we call it the Suwałki Corridor, not the Suwałki Gap, because a corridor is something you want to keep open, whereas a gap is something like the Fulda Gap you want to block. The Suwałki Corridor is so important because we have 3 NATO allies, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, on the other side of that corridor from the rest of from Poland and the rest of NATO. And so it is vulnerable because of the very short distance between Belarus and Kaliningrad. The whole point of military mobility is to be able to move as fast or faster than Russian Federation forces can move before the conflict starts. So this is the part that I think has been missed in all the, PESCO, and now finally people are talking about mobility, but they think about it in terms of in conflict. But the key, if you want to be able to deter Russia, they need to see that NATO forces can move faster than they can. Because obviously we will or should detect things that are happening in Belarus or in Western Russia in the military district, or elsewhere. So we need to be able to demonstrate to them, we see what you're doing, and we can get combat power to the place faster than they can. Today, we absolutely cannot do that because the understanding of our political leaders and many senior military leaders, they don't realize that we're having to do this in peacetime conditions. So no special exceptions for convoys. All of us will be competing with industry for access to DB cargo. So it's the same problem. 10 years ago, a migrant could move through Europe faster than a NATO convoy. Or a truckload of apples could go from Poland to Portugal faster than any NATO convoy. I was naive. I feel I wasted probably 3 or 4 years because I was thinking, come on, what's this so obvious? These are all NATO countries. It's all EU. It should be like going up and down I-95 in the U.S. And I was completely wrong. And it turns out that the Ministry of Defense in each country is not the critical ministry. It's the Ministry of Interior that controls the borders, and it's the finance ministry that pays for things. And almost all the solutions come from the EU or the nations. So I just spewed out a lot of different things, but I'm a little frustrated because we've been working on this for 10 effing years, and clearly I'm not very compelling. And I think only when civilian leaders and planners realize that the key is we have to move faster than Russian forces pre-crisis. Otherwise, we'll never really fix this.
Okay, and you mentioned, so I want to go back to what you just talked about a minute ago, the ease of moving products around the EU contrasted to military equipment. But let me first turn to you, Simona Cojocaru, former secretary and chief of the Department of Defense Policy for Romania. Romania plays a very critical role, a geographic role in NATO's southeastern flank. How would you describe the current state of Romanian transport infrastructure? And also, talk to us a little bit about the Black Sea and your concerns right there, the dynamics of moving things into and out of the Black Sea. It's a very tricky thing that governs it. Basically, all the Black Sea parties get a little vote, but Turkey sort of controls the pinch, and Russia thinks that it can dominate it. So talk to us a little bit about the critical role of Romania and the state of Romanian transport infrastructure to allow for reinforcements, and also what you want to say right now about the Black Sea and how to better, as a NATO country, how it should be better governed.
Thank you. So good afternoon, GLOBSEC, and thank you for the report. Very valuable. Actually, the war in Ukraine put again the spotlight on military mobility.
Yeah.
And actually, we are very much focusing, like other allies, on rapid deployment and sustainment of NATO forces. I have extensively listened these days quotes from NATO Secretary General that declared that we are all on the eastern flank.
Yeah.
So it's very, very much important to understand this all because, military mobility is a strategic necessity. This is not a luxury anymore, and I totally agree with Ben Hodges saying that we have to concentrate more on pre-crisis phases because it's absolutely very, very much important. And, of course, central to this shift, we are talking in NATO, and not only talking, we are doing things in relation to enablement of secure area of responsibility. And I'm talking here about reinforcement and sustainment network. That means, in short, infrastructure development and pre-positioning of stocks, another very important strength of work in this area. But coming back to Romania and your particular question, but again, this is not valid for Romania only, it's valid for the NATO eastern flank, for NATO generally speaking. Because, potential testing by Russia of Article 5 is also about military mobility.
Yeah.
It's very much important. And deterrence and defense is not really related to readiness of our forces and capabilities. It's about systems, legal framework, and procedures. By the way, exactly this June, right now, in Romania, we are hosting a huge exercise, which is called Saber Guardian, General.
Yeah.
Very impressive. 5,000 militaries from Romania, United States, Italy, and Republic of Moldova are currently exercising in Romania, exercising also military mobility. And this is part of a larger exercise, Defender, 10,000 militaries.
Is there an aspect of that's related to mobility, because you had to bring all these people in?
Absolutely, absolutely, because we have to train and exercise also administrative procedures, cross-border passing of our troops. And actually, what I'd like to say at this point is that we perfectly understood that we have to look at what Russia is doing. You know, being a country on the shore of the Black Sea, we are looking very much to what Russia is doing. By the way, according to some estimates, Russia will soon be able to target 500 drones at Ukraine per day. And there are some plans to transform the civil airport in Kerch, so very much linked to the Black Sea in a military base.
So you're imagining a more contested Black Sea, even beyond what's happening right now with a Ukrainian drone navy essentially taking out huge aspects of the Russian Black Sea fleet. You're imagining a more contested Black Sea. Is that a fair?
The Russian threat is persistent. So we have to be very much prepared. And the Russian threat is the most direct and significant threat to Euro-Atlantic security. And let's be frank. Let's admit, let's understand that Europe is not at peace anymore. And we have to do more in relation to military mobility, railways. Look what Russia is doing. Again, look back in 2021 when Russia absolutely deployed forces along the border with Ukraine, and nobody believed. Well, only few believed that a large-scale invasion will take place.
Yeah, we're believing it now. And so the drone thing, I think that's a really important point. So let me turn to you, Marc-Aurel Bischoff. He is Senior Director, EU Policy and Industrial Affairs at General Dynamics European Land Systems. And you guys make the bridges that go on the trucks. You go out, you deploy the bridge. Folks need to get from one place to another, and there was no bridge. Now you show up, bridge. So one of the things that we were talking about here is the prevalence of drones and the drone warfare change that now will be the character of war in the future. How does this affect how you think about the deployment of these things? What are you thinking about in terms of defending these assets from a threat that you've never had to before that is certainly going to be a permanent part of your future?
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you for having me. So I wish that it was so easy as you had described it in the beginning, that there was the necessity for a bridge and whoop, there was the bridge. It took us years to put military mobility on the agenda through reports like the one that has been introduced today, and to advocate for the acquisition of new mobile bridges. 90% of the whole mobile bridging capacities of NATO comes from my company. 90%. And it is by far not sufficient.
You want competitors. That's nice.
We have competitors, but I think we are doing a pretty good job with the bridges that we have, and we see now, as through all these efforts, also through the efforts of GLOBSEC in putting military mobility really on the agenda, on the political agenda, that this comes now to the drone threat. Drones, we are not only a manufacturer of bridges, but also of combat vehicles. So top attack is, of course, a threat that, a newer threat that we are trying to find solutions for. It's not within our personal domain of technology, but we are working with technology providers. And of course, protection, either by active protection.
Active protection is little panels that sit on the thing, and when the drone comes, it blows them out instead of blowing in, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Of any kind.
Yeah.
I mean, we know active protection systems already from attacks from the side.
Yeah.
Eurotrophy, for instance, is one example that we offer to our customers. But you have to see that these active protection systems are extraordinarily valuable. They are costly.
Yeah.
And if you consider a drone, which doesn't really cost a lot, and you have to counter this threat with a high value weapon,
that's not so good.
That's not optimal.
Yeah,
so we have to find new solutions for that.
Yeah, so you were telling me before, and I want to get to some Slido questions, so please get them in because they're really good to have, and some very good ones are showing up. But you are running into the same problem, the same economics of scale problem that U.S. destroyers are running into in the Red Sea, where basically you can have an SM-6 take out a $20,000 drone, but that's not a good use of, I mean, and it'll hit, an SM-6 will hit it just fine, but like that's not a fantastic use of your money, and so that scale's always going to be there. So in terms of other things you're looking at, we're talking about microwaves, but there's problems there with signal. It interrupts signal, it fries things. Directed energy, that's lasers, but you need a lot of power. And you said water, you're looking at potentially water cannons.
Well, we were discussing that in the room that we were getting ready.
Yeah, we're discussing it in this room, but I'm just curious, your thoughts.
Well, as I said, it's not our field of specialty, but our technology providers, they look into any avenue of technology that offers itself, and water could be one line to follow.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to also have something that after it has done its job, is not either ruining anything else or is threatening anything else.
Yeah.
So water comes to mind, but this is just an idea. I
know. Don't worry. I'm not selling you water cannons right now. But I think it's fascinating.
We are
not. I think it's fascinating how this drone problem has created just so many different avenues for innovation, and it's going to be a problem that persists. Basically, every Army service and really every installation is going to be faced with this. So again, some Slido questions, and please get yours in. I think this one is perfect for you, Ben, because you were talking a bit about this earlier, and you talk a lot about the need for a military Shenzhen zone. Why do we not have a military Shenzhen zone? Shouldn't we have such a thing?
So when I was still in the Army, I was trying to explain why military mobility was so important, trying to speak to ministers of defense, ministers of interior, et cetera, and I was not getting through. And then I thought, being an American, I will show how cool I am by using a European framework like Schengen to not only show how cool I was, but explain the effect we wanted, to be able to move like inside the Schengen. So that's where the idea of the military Schengen came up. That's what we need, to be able to move cross borders with all your stuff.
Yeah.
All right, that was the goal. And then I got called into the office of Ambassador Domek, who was the director of the EDA at the time, and he said, General, please stop saying military Schengen. And I said, well, I thought I was cool. And he goes, no, half of Europe hates it because they're not in it. The other half hates it because they equate it with uncontrolled migrant flow. And I said, okay, well, I'll think of something else. And then the next day, the Dutch Minister of Defense, she said, we need a military Schengen. So I was like, my work is done.
Yeah.
Why do we not have it yet? I thought we were going to make huge progress with the PESCO, the development of PESCO as a framework with the Netherlands and Germany as the two lead nations for it. But, as all of you know, if you're serious about something, you put money on it and you put people on it.
Yeah.
Within 1 year of PESCO project for military mobility being announced and €6 billion lined up against it, in 1 year it was down to like $1.5 billion. So we didn't make the progress I thought we would.
Well, so first General and then Secretary, because you have thoughts on this too. I think you might be in favor or not, but military Shenzhen zone.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to notice that General Hodges and I know it, and a lot of you too, there's a difference in the nomenclature in the both organizations. So on the NATO side, right now we're using either enablement or more the RSN, that was mentioned by the minister here. On the EU side, it's more military mobility. But I think the most important is that both of those, meaning one with two names, it has to become part of our resilience DNA. Because what was mentioned before, this is not only a military issue. This is whole of government decisions, cutting the procedures, the bureaucracy down, but also being less risk averse. Because the nations have to admit, okay, I will allow these hazardous materials to be transported faster, with less visibility maybe, and take that risk that, you know, as whenever you transport something that's dangerous goods, things might happen. And the other point is, we need to get out of this, I call it peacetime mentality comfort zone. Because we all think, okay, this is happening in Ukraine, we are still at peacetime officially, we need to continue adjusting and preparing for the worst. This is the only word to deter Russia and other adversaries. They need to know we are prepared and that we are, you know, really, we mean what we do. So those are the most important. And as I said, a lot of good things are happening, but probably not fast enough. And this issue of border crossing, again, it's happening, but very slow. Digitization and simplification, because it has to be whole of government approach, because it's not only Minister of Defense that's responsible. No,
I think it's a really good point. And the end of the peacetime mindset is something that's been coming up a lot. So, Secretary, you had something to add to this.
Romania is in Schengen now, so we are very much favoring military Schengen. Why not? However, could be military mobility areas. But what I really think it's important is to have a collective action on military mobility, which means pre-aligning with all the procedures and the norms. And what is very, very much important in relation to military movements is related to pre-authorized transit for certain units. This is key today, and moreover, pre-negotiated logistical arrangements. So this is very much related to this kind of military Schengen, let's put it like this. And please do not forget the recent talks in NATO at different levels, and we are very much approaching the summit in The Hague, and the equation says in relation to defense budget that 5% equals 3.5 plus 1.5, and that 1.5 means infrastructure and resilience, which is absolutely very much important. Our leaders changed the tone in relation with military mobility, also very much important.
I think that's interesting, because I know that one of the big fights within NATO for a long time is whether a country like Germany, for instance, can count infrastructure improvements as a defense investment that goes towards their GDP commitment. And there was a lot of sort of controversy around whether countries should do that or not. And it sounds like, yes, you have to begin to think about it like that. So we have more Slido questions, but at first I want to turn to you, Glen Howard, and sort of point out something that seems to be missing from the European discussion about different bureaucratic obstacles, that different ministers having a point of view and putting a barrier in place between moving military equipment. Russia targets Ukrainian train lines. They're targeting transportation infrastructure across Europe. So tell us about this. Like, should this understanding of hybrid warfare as it applies to European transport, should that be a part of the conversation in terms of how to increase the mobility across Europe, remove some of these barriers, and approach a more coherent, coordinated response?
Well, first of all, I think we need to kind of get away from using the term hybrid warfare. I think that's very much tied to Ukraine. Excuse me. So first of all, that's very much tied to the situation with hybrid warfare was used. And now we need to really jump into the whole idea that sabotage is really a part of warfare. And what you've seen in Germany, and you've seen also in Poland, you've seen the Russian consulate in Poznan and other places. They become outlets for recruitment of people to do, in some cases, even Ukrainians that have been there as refugees. They're recruiting to commit acts of sabotage. So why is this important? Because the idea is that sabotage and efforts have been made also in Germany. And so the mobility issue is tied to, if there's a conflict that goes on inside of Europe, and this conflict expands, the Russian notion is to basically stigmatize the population in thinking that they're, say in the case of Germany, that they're going to be caught up in World War III to make them try to diminish their support for the efforts to support Ukraine. So it's tied into a propaganda dimension, and that's where the sabotage element of and whole hybrid warfare fits into that. And so that affects the mobility issue because it undermines public support for backing Ukraine or NATO.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because, you know, different ministers think about transportation within their countries as a specific issue related to their department, but the attacks, the vulnerability, that's across NATO. That's basically something they all share. So, General, you had something on this.
Just a quick add-on. I think this is an extremely point you raised. Ladies and gentlemen, if our transportation nodes and our critical infrastructure are not well protected, the enemy can get easy access and not only disrupt, but actually follow exactly and get real data about what we're moving, where we're moving, and so on. And it's, you know, reasonably easy sometimes because some companies do not want to allow the probes, so-called, of the Cyber Command, for example, to support them because they feel this is privacy issue and everything. But Russians are able to get into our train systems, okay? Think about it. You don't need to have somebody observing. You just get into the system and you don't disrupt it. You just get the data, right? You place the remote, typical, you know, hunting remote cameras. You can still collect this information. You hire, as mentioned here by my colleague, you hire the proxies. Quite often also Ukrainian citizens, or at least holding the citizenship, to do this proxy sabotage on us. You remember what happened in France, the big fire of at the train station, right, for the SNCF that stopped the trains. In Poland, they were able to turn on the radio red signal in part of Poland for a long time, which stopped all the trains. So think about it. You don't need to send Spetsnaz right now. You can cause so much turmoil to our RSNs, to our military mobility, even now in peacetime, and it's actually happening. So we need to also build the resilience, okay? A lot of those companies also sometimes belong to countries that are not maybe that friendly to us. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, no, that is a huge challenge. I'm reminded of the pipeline attack in the United States back in 2022. They didn't attack the pipeline. They didn't attack the SCAD system that runs the pumps. They attacked the accounting software, which was very vulnerable and no one was paying any attention to it, but then you couldn't bill for the gas you were pumping. And you can imagine all these different little places in Europe where that's a vulnerability that, I mean, there might be a need on a national level and a NATO level to buy new computers to sit on these desks that are running more modern operating systems that are properly defended. So it's mind-bogglingly difficult problems. But thanks you all for solving it. I can just talk about it. Let's go to some of these questions. Wouldn't it make sense to Europeanize the Baltic defense line and Poland's East Shield, including forward deployment of multinational troops to deter Russia? This is something that a lot of people have been advocating for. So please,
well,
General.
First of all, we all need to remember that the Eastern Front, or Eastern Flank as we call it, is the border of more or less both organizations, NATO and EU. So it's not only the military defense, but it's also the defense against this state-sponsored migration from Belarus or from the land of Belarus that it's also supported by Russia. So absolutely yes, it should be a common effort because what is being done at the border provides more security for the rear. That's one point. Second one, I think we need to find a good balance because you need the forward deployment, you need the prepositioning, absolutely yes, but also you need to find the ways of quickly bringing the mass into the battlefield. Preemptive is rather not in the European DNA to do anything preemptive, even though it will be obvious that on the other side something is boiling. But again, how to bring the mass, and I think there are ways of doing it with all the so-called innovative, disruptive technologies. So we need both. We need the physical presence to make sure that there are, that there are troops, but there's also a great part to be played by those innovative, disruptive technologies.
Yeah, Secretary, you were also saying sort of the same thing, that it makes sense to start pre-positioning things now, including international troops, I'm thinking, closer within Romania, and this might have a better effect on governance of the Black Sea or other issues. Is that
Absolutely, this is of such a great importance. And I'd like also to recall to you one lesson learned from Ukraine. it is such a vulnerability to use a single route corridor.
Yes.
So I think we should learn more from what is happening right now in Ukraine, because actually the future of war is now happening in Ukraine, is now happening in the Black Sea. And yes, we need more prepositioning, but we need targeted investments in dual-use infrastructure, because infrastructure, in our view, is the most impactful, if you like, enable in relation to military mobility. And I do support the idea of countries on the eastern flank to become regional hubs. Very, very much important today in relation with military mobility, apart from investments in reinforced bridges, roads, tunnels, and also modernized railways and strategic logistic hubs and storages. Absolutely very important in this.
Yes, Mark, please go ahead.
We should also not forget that military mobility also means, at least in our understanding, to have capabilities, manufacturing capabilities, where the equipment is needed, and to maintain the equipment where it is needed. And that involves a certain amount of industrialization. It involves, of course, localization, transfer of technology, and we do not see that, I would say, sufficiently with all market competitors. I know that we specialize in that, and that part of our success is not only because of the equipment itself, but because of the industrialization that goes with it. Romania is a very good example in our case. It's one of our home countries, and the Romanians are now able to manufacture their wheeled armored vehicles themselves. And that also is one aspect, an important aspect of their mobility, of their military mobility.
I think it's a really important point, and that also speaks to the changing nature of war, where long supply lines are increasingly vulnerable. Creation of the things that you need closer to the edge. And Ukraine is a fantastic example. I talked to a lot of folks in Ukraine. They spend time talking to U.S. troops actually in Poland at that airbase with the Patriot battery, and the folks in Poland download manuals on like howitzers, and the guys in Ukraine have 3D printers in the mud, and they like make replacement parts in the mud, and sometimes they improve the design of the product, frankly. So that's kind of it. That's the future of military supply in many ways. Closer, more immediate to where you are, far more rapid, but it doesn't just happen immediately. Ben, you had a thought on this. Did you have, you seemed, no? Okay. I wasn't entirely sure. You have a very pensive look. It seems pregnant with thought and concept. So, deep in thought? Okay. What is the situation with logistics on NATO's most eastern flank? Turkey, question mark. Turkey? Yes. How would you characterize Turkey as a partner in terms of broader NATO mobility? Secretary, any?
Turkey is a very important ally at the Black Sea and NATO, generally speaking, and has a critical role in that area. We are talking now about regional plans adopted by NATO, very, very important strands of work. And by the way, military mobility is part of the implementation of the regional plan. And this one of the plans are including Romania, Bulgaria, and of course Turkey. And probably you know that we put a lot of effort in elevating the cooperation at regional level with Turkey in relation to military mobility. And I will offer you a couple of examples. We have signed a letter of intent in relation to military mobility with Bulgaria and Turkey. Of course, we have signed also with Bulgaria and Greece, and for the Corridor 8 with Italy, Albania, North Macedonia, Bulgaria, and of course Romania. So now we are in the implementation phase of this letter of intent, and the aim is to have concrete results on the ground. Moreover, let's not forget another strand of work, which is related to extending the NATO pipelines system, which is also very important in this, picture of getting better on military mobility in the southern part of the eastern flank.
Yeah, so it's great. So there's a massive coordinated response. to encourage Turkey's great partnership capabilities, and I think that that's something really important, and it must be very diplomatically difficult, because that's the thing about NATO. I'm always surprised how complex it is just to talk to other Americans. I can't imagine trying to keep an alliance this dense together in such a way. I mean, you can talk to people in the south of France who will have really strong disagreements with people in the north of France about how thick the crust of brie should be, so I can't even imagine. But we have time for one or two more. And I think this one speaks to that earlier theme of increasing the speed of mobility by decreasing the size of things, being able to be more maneuverable, and doing so by using new technology. So using new defense tech. Shouldn't we develop a light footprint, heavy firepower European way of war, which would also help close our military mobility gap? Can we make things smaller? Can we scale up light solutions, but also end that great big supply line thing through new technology? Ben, you have a thought, and you too, General. Yes.
So first, I do want to make sure we use the correct terminology with regards to Turkey. They're an ally. They're not a partner. And it's very important. We talk about allies versus partners, because there's a treaty obligation with an ally. And yes, all 32 members of the alliance piss off the other 31 once a week. So it's Turkey is spring-loaded to be offended, but you know what? People get annoyed with the U.S. They get France kicked NATO out. So I don't get hung up too much on Turkey alone. They are an essential. I don't even want to think about NATO without Turkey. The size of vehicles, I tell you this, I think the technology for wheels is far advanced beyond the technology for tracks. I mean, I'm an infantry guy. I love having tanks. Soldiers like that big mobile protected firepower. But frankly, if I had to choose between a brigade on wheels and a track brigade, I would always ask for the brigade on wheels because of the mobility. Its ability, you don't have to have rail. The tanks, you have to have trains, or hundreds of those heavy equipment transport trucks that can carry tanks down the highway. And so I think changing or relying less on vehicles that weigh 75 tons would help solve some of the mobility problem. But, also vehicles have gotten so big that we can't go through all the tunnels we used to go through.
Mark, you had a thought on this.
It's at the essence of what we do. I mean, how can we reduce dimension and weight? Weight is even more important. And without compromising firepower and protection. And this is why, I mean, I'm proud as a German on probably the best main battle tank in the world.
Second best, but...
I knew that you were going to say that. This is why I could make the argument. But what is it worth if you cannot deploy it in the given infrastructure? And this is why we think that what we would call a medium main battle tank is a solution in which we may not be able to kill the opponent, but to force the opponent to abort the mission. And to deter the mission.
Well, later on we should play Tank Battle and check it out. But Zeus, you got the final thought, and then...
So Turkey is also an associated nation in the Eurocorps. So I have both NATO and EU countries that are either on both sides or in one of the organizations. Well, one tactical example, the so-called TEUs, which is 20-foot equivalent units, basically the typical shipment containers. Right now, their size is standardized, but when you put it on a certain vehicles, it's above 4 meters, which means it becomes an oversized cargo, which there is trouble getting special permissions to ride for the countries. But going back to the new tech, absolutely, I'm a big fan, and we need to continue experimenting and introducing more and more all sorts of unmanned autonomous vehicles, which will help with the logistics immensely, I believe. 3D printing, as you mentioned, this will be the revolution once we have filled it completely. It's cheap, fast, the right materials. I will not need to get all my spare parts. I will just have to I will be able to print them on the battlefield. The challenge is proprietary rights, because if I am using somebody's equipment, I may not get access to all the technical data to make a specific part and so on.
Yeah.
But it's also about the AI and also about the real data. Just to mention that, whatever we do in logistics, we need the real data. And now there are systems that I will not mention the name, that you get instant alarm, alert, that on the particular convoy route that you have your convoy, something has happened. So we did not have that before. Right now, we have to get used, and we have to work off the real data.
Wow, see, what a great note to end on, because that gives a real vision of the future. We could have had a whole nother panel on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we close, a little announcement. There's going to be a rapid response panel added to today's program, 18:05 in the Schwarzenberg stage, featuring Amos Glen, founder and president of Mind Israel. He's a former head of IDF military intelligence, and he'll be talking about recent escalations between Israel and Iran. I wonder what that could be about. But, ladies and gentlemen, right now, please join me in thanking my panel today for this. Thank you.